Transgender people are a topic that's often mentioned, but not always truly understood. There are still many stereotypes and misconceptions around them, which leads society to see the community the wrong way. In today's video, we're going to explain and unpack the 5 most common misunderstandings about transgender people to see what the truth really is and why we need to change the way we look at things. 1. Transgender people are actually just gay. This is one of the most common mix-ups. People confuse gender identity with sexual orientation. They assume that if someone was born male but is attracted to men, then he's gay. And if he wants to be female, that's just a more complicated version of being gay. In reality, these are 2 completely different ideas. Gender identity is how a person understands and identifies themselves as male, female, both, or outside the gender binary. That's who I am. Sexual orientation is about who a person is attracted to, men, women, or both. That's who I love. For example, a transgender woman born male but identifying as female might be attracted to men, straight, to women, lesbian, or to both, bisexual. Trans people's orientations are as diverse as anyone else's, so you simply cannot equate transgender with gay. This confusion comes from a few reasons. First, there's a conceptual mix-up. In many languages and cultures, gender and sexuality are lumped together, so the public finds them hard to tell apart. Second, there's the legacy of older media. Films and newspapers used to blur these lines and often portrayed transgender people as extreme gay people who want to change gender. Back to the video, this misunderstanding doesn't just distort reality, it hurts transgender people. When you treat them as just a kind of gay, you erase their lived experience of gender identity, which is entirely different from sexual orientation. It also makes advocacy harder. Instead of being recognized as a group with its own needs and challenges, they get folded, too simply, into the broader LGBT community. In my view, equating transgender people with gay people is a shallow way to look at human diversity. Transgender people can be straight, gay, bisexual, any orientation, just like anyone else. To change this misconception, we need clearer education about the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. Only when we understand correctly can we show proper respect. Transgender people are not just gay, they are themselves, and their identities deserve independent recognition. 2. Being transgender is just a trend. A lot of people still think being transgender is a fashionable fad that only appeared in the last few years, especially because the topic shows up so often on social media, in movies, and in the news. Some even compare it to short-lived crazes, clothing styles, music waves, TikTok challenges. But that idea is simply wrong. Transgender people have existed for hundreds, even thousands of years. In South Asia, for instance, the Higra community has long been recognized as part of society, with roles in cultural and religious ceremonies. Among indigenous peoples in North America, the two-spirit concept describes those who embody both masculine and feminine aspects and are seen as spiritually significant. Across many other cultures, people who don't fit neatly into a strict male-female box have been around for a very long time. That shows transgender identity isn't a product of the 21st century or of social media. It's a natural part of human diversity. So why do many people mistake it for a trend? I'd say there are a few main reasons. First is modern media. Over the past 10-15 years, more public figures have come out as transgender. Laverne Cox, Caitlyn Jenner, Elliot Page, which made the issue far more visible. To those who hadn't encountered it before, it can look new. Second is the influence of social platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. They give trans people space to speak, and the speed of sharing gets misread as a trend. Third is a lack of historical knowledge. Many people haven't learned that gender diversity has always existed beyond a strict male-female binary. So when they first notice it, they label it new. And of course, there's prejudice. Some people deliberately call it a trend to dismiss or devalue trans people's existence rather than face the reality of gender diversity. Thinking of transgender identity as a trend is a way of minimizing and denying people's identities. It's like hearing about a culture for the first time and immediately deciding it's temporary or unimportant. That's disrespectful, and it can be genuinely harmful to people who already face many obstacles. When society treats being trans as a fad, it overlooks what the community truly needs: the right to live as themselves, and the right to protection and respect. It breeds condescension and makes empathy and support harder to find. To me, calling it a trend is not just historically wrong, it's socially dangerous. It turns a deeply personal, lifelong experience into a joke or a passing phase. The truth is, transgender people have always existed and always will. Instead of dismissing them, we should see this visibility as a sign of a more open era. Society is finally learning to listen to voices that were silenced in the past. What we need to do is not to deny, but to respect, learn, and stand with them. 3. Transgender people are just confused about their gender. One of the most common misconceptions is the belief that transgender people are simply confused or uncertain about their gender. People think they are just going through a temporary phase and will eventually go back to normal. But in reality, most transgender people describe their sense of gender identity as clear, consistent, and stable over time. To make it easier to understand, think about how you know whether you are male or female. That feeling isn't confusion, it's a firm awareness of who you are. For transgender people, it's the same. They know their true gender, but it doesn't match the sex assigned to them at birth. There are many reasons why this misunderstanding appears and spreads. One is the lack of direct experience. Many people have never actually talked to or listened to transgender people share their journey. Without direct understanding, prejudice forms easily. Another is the influence of outdated ideas. In the past, medicine and society treated being transgender as a psychological disorder, a kind of mistaken thinking, and that outdated view still lingers in many minds. A third reason is the confusion between the process of exploring identity and the long-term certainty of it. Yes, some people may question their gender while growing up, but exploring yourself is natural. That does not mean all transgender people are confused. In fact, most are very clear and firm about their identity. And finally, misleading media plays a role. Some films or entertainment shows portray transgender people as unsure or just experimenting, creating a distorted image instead of showing the truth of their stable identities. Labeling transgender people as confused is a way of denying their legitimacy. It makes society dismiss their voices and choices, as if saying you don't really know who you are. This is especially harmful because for many transgender people, admitting their true selves has already been a long and courageous journey. On top of that, such labels create social pressure, forcing transgender people to constantly prove themselves, while cisgender people, those whose gender matches the sex they were assigned at birth, are rarely ever questioned about their identities. In my view, saying transgender people are confused is both ignorant and unfair. No one knows themselves better than they do. If someone is firm in saying they are male, female, or outside the gender binary, then we should respect that. I believe that treating transgender identity as confusion is not only scientifically wrong, but it also strips real people of their right to recognition. Instead of judging, we need to learn to listen, because only genuine listening will help society understand correctly and treat the transgender community fairly. 4. You have to get surgery to be truly transgender. Another common and very harmful misconception is the belief that transgender people are only real if they undergo surgery or medical treatment such as hormone therapy, chest surgery, or genital surgery. This is completely false. Transgender identity is defined by how a person understands and identifies their gender, not by whether they have medical intervention. Some choose hormones or surgery to feel more comfortable in their bodies, but many others do not, whether for reasons of health, finances, culture, or simply personal choice. With or without surgery, they are still transgender. There are several reasons society continues to hold on to this misconception. One is the influence of media images. Films and newspapers often tell the stories of those who have undergone surgery, which makes the public think that surgery is the only way to prove identity. Another is binary gender thinking. Society is used to the idea that male and female are defined by the body, so many believe you must change your body to become male or female. A third reason is the lack of awareness of diverse experiences. Every transgender person has their own journey. Some only change their clothing or voice, some use hormones, some choose surgery, and some do nothing at all. Society, however, is not used to this diversity, so it assumes the surgery is the standard. And finally, there is legal and social pressure. In many countries, the right to change official documents, such as ID cards or passports, is still tied to surgical requirements, which reinforces the false belief that surgery is necessary. This misconception causes serious harm. It puts unnecessary pressure on transgender people, forcing them to prove their identity by changing their bodies, even when they do not want to or cannot do so. It turns surgery into a social standard instead of a personal choice. Worse, it leads to invasive questions like, "Have you had surgery yet?" or "When will you do it?" These questions are deeply disrespectful because they invade privacy and reduce people to their bodies instead of respecting them as whole human beings. In my opinion, whether or not to have surgery is entirely a personal decision, and no one has the right to set conditions for recognizing someone's gender identity. What makes someone transgender is their self-identification, not a medical certificate or a scar on their body. I truly believe that if society keeps pushing surgery as the standard, we will only create more barriers and prejudice. Instead, we need to understand that each transgender journey is unique and every choice is valid. Respect begins with accepting them as the people they say they are, whether their bodies change or not. 5. Being transgender is a mental illness. For decades, society treated being transgender as a psychological disorder or a mental illness. Some old medical texts even classified it under gender identity disorder. This created the false idea that transgender people needed to be treated so they could return to being normal. But today, science and medicine have changed their view. The World Health Organization officially removed transgender identity from the list of mental disorders in the International Classification of Diseases, ICD-11. Instead, WHO now recognizes it as a matter of gender health, meaning that medical support, if needed, is about helping people live according to their true gender identity, not treating a disease. In other words, being transgender is not an illness, but simply one natural form of human diversity. From what I found, there are several reasons why this misconception persists. First is the legacy of the past. In the 20th century, psychiatry did not understand gender diversity and labeled it as a disorder. Even though medicine has since changed, many people still cling to the old idea. Second is social prejudice. When a group is seen as different, people often label them as sick to justify their discrimination. Third is misleading media. In the past, films and newspapers often portrayed transgender people as tragic figures with psychological problems, reinforcing the stigma. And finally, there's a lack of formal education. In many places, knowledge about gender and identity is not widely taught, so people rely on stereotypes and rumors instead of scientific information. Thinking of transgender identity as a disease causes countless negative consequences. It leads to discrimination in education, employment, and healthcare. Many transgender people have been forced into so-called treatments, isolated, or even subjected to psychological and physical abuse. In reality, the biggest problems transgender people face do not come from their identity, but from the stigma and discrimination of society. When they're labeled patients, they lose their right to self-determination and are not treated as equal human beings. To me, calling transgender identity a mental illness is both scientifically wrong and unjust from a human rights perspective. We cannot call someone a patient just because they don't fit society's traditional gender boxes. I believe gender diversity is a natural part of humanity. Transgender people do not need to be cured. What truly needs curing are the prejudice and ignorance that still exist in our minds. And those are 5 common misconceptions about transgender people that I've researched and shared with you. Do you know of other misconceptions? Leave a comment below so I can learn more and share useful information with the community. That's the end of today's video. If you found it helpful, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to support me in creating more quality content. Thanks for watching and see you next time.